Hello, hello, hello. Welcome. We are so excited to have everyone here for this back to school stream. We have an awesome panel here tonight, and we're going to dive into all of your conversations, questions, all sorts of things, and just excited to see everyone here live or if you're watching after the fact. We always like to, as we come on, as you get settled, to check in with you. We'd love to know who you are, where you're watching from. And we always like to start off with a fun question. I will say I'm in Atlanta right now where it still feels like summer. So I am having fall feelings and I'm really eager for fall time and sweater weather, which I am wearing. I'm pretending it's fall. So I would love to hear from our panelists and from you in the chat. What is your favorite fall tradition as we head into the fall season? What does the fall season look like for you? So feel free to let us know in the chat. And Alex, I'll go to you first. Do you have a favorite thing?
Well, I mean, Rosh Hashanah is coming up. So the Jewish holidays, I guess, I mean, they're a tradition and they happen in the fall. So technically, yeah. I think, by the way, this is like in our dorm room, like every floor has a different season. And I think this is like a fall themed background right here. So, yeah. I don't know. I can't think of many like actual fall traditions. Mostly, I just kind of like the weather. It's like it's a mood. I kind of prefer the spring weather, but I do like it. It's chill and maybe listening to like some music, just yeah.
Love it. Well, I love that you're in a fall room and bringing in Rosh Hashanah is a great way for us to talk about fall and to pull in our faith initiatives too. So thank you, Alex. And I see in the chat, Amy, pumpkin pie, and Erica, we have football game days, all the traditions that come with it.
Oh yeah, baby, football's coming.
All the things. And Cash, the smell of leaves dropping in a park in a morning fog. Oh, I love it. So Denise, do you have a favorite fall thing as we get into
I'm
this?
with Erica. We have football game days in our back patio with our neighborhood friends, and it's a potluck, and everyone gets excited about what the menu is going to be. So we're super excited for this Sunday.
I love that. That's awesome.
I think I'm gonna watch the Eagles. I'm an Eagles fan, so I think we're gonna watch the Eagles Patriots game, maybe with some of my friends. We'll say.
Yeah, retiring Brady's number.
Oh yeah.
Thanks, Alex. And Shersty, do you have a favorite fall tradition?
Yeah, and I'm having faux fall in my cardigan because it's like 90 degrees outside because I'm in California. So I'm pretending in my house. I think my favorite, because I'm like in mom mode, is we do like this Halloween dinner where we eat really gross looking food. And it's like this whole spread of disgusting looking things like brains and stuff. So that's probably my favorite thing right now.
I kind of love that. That's awesome. Thank you.
Good exposures too for my like son.
That's what I was thinking.
Nasty food. So yeah, that tastes good.
I love that. And I see Spence Robert fall festivals like Oktoberfest. Okay, so I'll be curious as folks continue to drop stuff in, but I like that Shersty and I are both in really warm places and are sporting sweaters getting ready for fall here. Wonderful. Well, we are so excited to have you all here tonight. This live stream is educational. It is not intended to replace therapy. For treatment-related questions, please work with your provider or contact a local clinician. You can go to the IOCDF's online resource directory at iocdf.org/findhelp to locate a trained clinician near you. The International OCD Foundation is not a crisis hotline. If you are in crisis or if you're ever feeling suicidal or unsafe, please go to your local emergency room or call 911 or the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline by dialing 988. You can also access online at www.988lifeline.org. And finally, we want to create a safe space. We want to be kind and respectful to everyone, because at the end of the day, we are all here to support one another. But a note that this is being broadcast on several social media platforms and is being recorded. So keep that in mind as you respond to one another and as you respond to the dialogue tonight. But our favorite thing really about these streams is that we're live and we get to advocate live, that you get to be here and support one another in these conversations on back to school and on OCD. So we just want to do that respectfully as we advocate alongside one another. So I'm going to go ahead and jump in so we can get to the fun part, which is our discussion. I'll introduce our panelists. I think for folks who come to these Tuesday streams, I know many of you, but if I have not met you, I am Katie. I am one of our IOCDF lead advocates. I lead a lot of things around faith and OCD because I am an ordained minister with OCD and an interfaith chaplain with OCD. But my previous role before the work that I do now was working in school chaplaincy. And this topic tonight is particularly significant to me because I think about students that I worked with for so many years navigating OCD and anxiety, and where back to school season was particularly tricky. And this is something that I'm really passionate about, having this whole panel of experts here tonight to really shed light on. So tonight we have Shersty, who is a dedicated wife and mother of 4 young children. She has lived experience with OCD as well as lived experience as a parent of a child with OCD. She is an active member and organizer of a grassroots OCD awareness group in Santa Clarita called OCD Awareness SCV. Shersty is a compassionate advocate for individuals with OCD through her social media platform, KJ OCD Recovery. Here she shares her own recovery story to break down the stigma surrounding OCD. Shersty is dedicated to supporting individuals with OCD as well as parents navigating an OCD diagnosis with their child. So we are so excited to have you here tonight.
Thank you.
And then we have Denise Eganstack, who is on the International OCD Foundation Board of Directors and the Scientific and Clinical Advisory Board. In addition, Denise has been a home-based therapist for people with OCD and anxiety for over 25 years, was a founding staff member of the McLean Hospital OCD Institute in 1997, and has served on as the mental health consultant for the Cape Cod Hoarding Task Force for over 10 years. She has presented and trained clinicians and educators on cognitive behavioral therapy and acceptance and commitment therapy for OCD and related disorders nationally and internationally. And I will say Denise is one of the people who has inspired me in my own journey of faith and OCD work to really feel confident in doing that and inspire so many in our community. So thank you for being here.
So happy to be here.
And then finally, we have Alex Rosenberg, who is a college student studying psychology at Columbia University. He has been an active IOCDF advocate from an early age and is currently particularly engaged in advocacy pertaining to his challenges with OCD as a young adult and as a person of Jewish faith. He has spoken at the IOCDF's annual conference and faith and OCD conferences, as well as IOCDF YouTube live streams. He is also a member of the IOCDF's Faith and OCD Task Force and Special Interest Group and the Young Adult Special Interest Group. And he wants to support others in finding hope to take their meaningful lives back from OCD, just as others have provided similar support to him. And I'll say he's a huge core of our Faith and OCD Task Force and a previous Youth Hero Award that I have to say on everything so that he goes, yep, so I get the head fake. So Alex, we are so glad to have you here. Yeah, that's what I was looking for. Thank you.
Thanks, Mom. I mean, Katie,
Yep.
Thanks. Anyway.
So we're going to go ahead and jump in. And of course, we want to get to all of your questions. So go ahead and feel free to plug in any questions about school, about families, about OCD, and we'll try to get to those as well. But I want to start with some general questions on this topic and ask the group as really a whole, and I'll go to each one of you. But I want to start with just what are some of the common OCD related challenges students face when returning to school? And I know this can look different for students of all ages, but what are some of the challenges that show up as a parent, as someone who has actually, who is in school right now from a clinical perspective? And Alex, I'll go to you first because I know you're starting back school and are in the throes of this as we speak.
Yeah, so I mean, I think there are a few different kinds of challenges. One challenge is certainly the living, every different aspect of living conditions. When I'm here, I kind of don't have as much space as I do at home, and I kind of need to make things work with other people. I managed to not have a roommate this semester, which is something I personally needed. Some people, a roommate can actually be helpful. So it's kind of a balance, because a roommate, if there's a little bit more social pressure, it kind of helps, to move things along. For me personally, it was like a little bit too much. It was like not working with my schedule. And so I needed to get my own room in order to prioritize more sleep. But so there's that side of things. And just all of the busyness going from class to class, all the people, the crowdedness. It's like, it's a lot of like, stimulation. And within that, there are quite a few different triggers for OCD. It's like, there's a ton of triggers. But so there's the kind of nuts and bolts of it. On another hand, there's the kind of, me thinking about my future and the kind of pressure side of it. And so, for instance, I am signed up for way too many credits, 7 classes, and I'm in a dual BA program. And one of my friends are telling me, like, you cannot do this. You will not survive final season with this. And so I think they have talked me into dropping one of my classes. And something that I'm really thinking about this is really prioritizing my mental health. And, on the one hand, like, I think sometimes my OCD can kind of make me, it doesn't feel just right. For instance, if I'm dropping, one of the classes that I was prepared on taking, but it's the kind of thing where I've needed to, I think, shift a little bit what my perspectives are, what some of the things that I'm valuing are, and then to kind of embrace this uncertainty, and in some cases in new ways, with new systems of values. It's not just about pushing myself to be able to do work or to get up on time, but it's also about pushing myself to kind of change my perspectives and say, you know what, look, sometimes I shouldn't be working. Sometimes I shouldn't be, pushing myself that hard, because there's more to life, than just, this one way of looking at it. So there's kind of, I think, a bunch of different levels that can go into it. Yeah, I think that's what I'll say for now. Yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you, Alex. And I would imagine, and just to ask, and we'll keep going with, and definitely come back to it, but I assume that that's been a shift for you over the years, right? And being able to find that balance and being able to prioritize self-care. Was that something that you were always able to do? Has that been a shift for you?
It's like, I don't know. I think a lot of these kinds of things are very complicated, because on one hand, over the summer, I think that I was not doing enough. Definitely, I was. I think I probably was not on a great schedule, and so with this school year, I'm really working on, kind of improving my schedule and really pushing myself. On another hand, it's kind of the stage where it's like, I need to start pushing myself, but then afterwards, I kind of need to take a step back. And then after I take a step back, I need to say, okay, maybe should I be pushing myself a little bit more? And then maybe I'm not doing, maybe I'm doing that a little too much. And then all the while, I'm like, wait, am I obsessing over, over whether I'm pushing myself too much or too little? So it's I think of it as kind of an interweb of a lot of different things. Where these aren't the kinds of things where there's really easy answers either way. I think it's kind of both things at the same time.
Thank you, Alex. Well, I'd love to go over to Denise. And Denise, if you'd be willing to share with us some challenges, some OCD related challenges that you see with students as they return to school.
Sure. I think, in general, transitions and the accompanying uncertainty associated with transitions is really very difficult for people with OCD. And I think going back to school is a big transition. I think it's especially so if, kids are going from elementary to middle to high school to college, or if kids are going back to school in a new school district, or going back to school without their best friend or without a touchstone adult in the school system. I think that's very difficult. So I think in general, like the uncertainty of it all. I think college kids especially, transitioning from home to living independently and sorting all of that out, make a lot of times people with OCD also have social anxiety. And so, navigating making friendships, navigating independent living skills, navigating just like how to work it all, how it all works together. I think that's sort of what's happening with the college kids, but symptom specific. some of the younger kids I have, school is contaminated or someone at the school is contaminated. So the thought of going back to that is just exhausting. People who have academic perfectionism, really, again, it's very triggering to have to go back into that after the summer off, or kids who, fear getting sick or fear causing harm, going back into a group-based situation in a classroom or recess or the lunchroom it's very difficult for them. And so that can get so overwhelming that sometimes kids are refusing school. I've already fielded many phone calls in the last week or two of kids who are like, this is just too much. I can't do it. Right. So that's what I'm seeing clinically.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And we'll get into that some tonight with kind of that piece of, especially right now, not wanting to go back to school for all of the reasons you mentioned in different ages. And Kirsty, I wonder what your experience is with this as a mom and seeing these challenges with kids returning to school.
Yeah, back to school is so interesting because I feel like we get in a really good routine at the end of the school year. We're fighting OCD, we're doing exposures, we know what we need to work on, and then summer comes and all of that kind of goes out the window, and then school starts again and all those variables are introduced again. Like for us, it's being on time, doesn't want to be tardy, turning in work on time, friendships. Like school introduces, I feel like, an infinite amount of variables for OCD to dig into. Something that we work on with Jaden is he brings his work home that he doesn't need to be bringing home because he's so worried about finishing it at school. So it interferes with your home life because they're trying to finish their work that they might not be finishing in class, even though there's plenty of time. So it can be a doozy just because your summer is so easy. We don't have a lot of OCD in the summer. Mm-hmm. And then school, we know we kind of have to get ready because it's coming and we need to just kind of make a plan. What are we going to do when it starts to show up again?
We get out of practice.
Yeah. Because it's easy. It's easy to have a break. Mm-hmm. But it's something that sometimes I'm kind of right now, I'm I wish we would have kind of stayed with some of our routines that we let go in the summer, because now we're starting back from square one again.
Yeah. Well, and I wonder, and I have to say, I mentioned Youth Hero Award a second ago. Jaden is amazing and won our Youth Hero Award for the IOCDF this year. And so I guess as you work with him and going back to school, do you have advice for maybe other parents who are supporting their kids during this back to school process, whether it's what Denise was speaking about just a second ago about kids not wanting to go or just trying to get back into that routine? I'd love to hear, have you found there are things that work really well or maybe things that don't work so well? What does that support look like for you?
Yeah, something that I think is really important is, as a parent, your parenting is not the same as anyone else's parenting who doesn't have a kid with OCD. And I think that's important because sometimes I look at other people and think, man, they don't have to do what we do, but you just have to accept that your parenting is different. An example is just the other day, something I try and do is not tell him, oh, I think you're having OCD. I just say, I notice you're really focusing a lot on this. What do you think? Do you feel like this is kind of OCD? So one thing is taking tests. He feels so much pressure to get 100%, and he usually does. So I said, well, what if you don't get 100%? What if you purposefully mark some of those answers wrong, even though you know that they're right? What parent tells their kid to try and do worse on a test? But that's kind of what you have to do with OCD or I say, well, what if you don't glue that thing on all the way and maybe it might fall on the wall, you don't do your art quite right. So, and now that he's older, I let him kind of run his exposures. I'm like, what can you do? He'll come home and say, I used whiteout and then I realized it was a compulsion, so I did it again wrong. So I try and let him lead the show, but help him see maybe you're starting to have OCD. What can we do to fight it? So it's a team effort. But now that he's getting older, I try and let him lead the effort because it is kind of his decision if he wants to fight it or not.
Mm-hmm. I love hearing you talk about and it being a team effort and you starting with him at such in early, it's just setting him up for success in so many, and not success in the perfectionist success way. It's like success in the, hey, we can accept uncertainty kind of way and live our life. And, even hearing that, I think about, I struggled. So, and I won't get into too much to this, but I struggled so much in some of these areas with school. And I actually remember going through college and everything had to be absolutely perfect. In my last semester of college, I got my, report card or whatever it was, and I had a minus next to one of my A's. And I actually remember trying to like wipe it off my computer screen because I was like, what is that thing next to my A and what happened? And I had like a full-blown panic attack because it was, how could I possibly have been imperfect? How could I sit with this? How could I be able to move forward? And it was a really big deal for me. I thought my life was kind of rocked at that point, which, OCD took lots of turns after that. But I think to your point, it would have been so different if growing up, it would have been, let me intentionally do some of these things in ways that aren't quite perfect. I mean, that's really brave of you to do that with him.
Thanks. Yeah. And it can be fun too. Like one thing we're going to do this next week is see how close we can come to being late to school because he worries about being late. So we're going to like push the boundary and see how close, or maybe we will be late, but we're going to try and see how close. So you can kind of make it fun too, like a game almost.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, Denise, what would you, and then I'll go over to you, Alex. I was going to ask Denise, what would you recommend for parents kind of in this back to school season? Do you have particular skills or tools that you would recommend as parents are navigating with their kids kind of heading back into school?
Yeah. One thing, the first thing on my list always when I'm coaching parents is to manage their own anxiety and emotions about it. And I think Shersti is modeling that very well. We are expecting back to school to be difficult. It is a rocky transition and it is really hard to watch your child struggle. Like it is just incredibly difficult. But one thing we know from the research is that oftentimes, anxious kids have anxious parents, and we need to just make sure that we're managing our own emotions, we're projecting confidence, and we have capacity to, really make time to meaningfully discuss the transition and what's going on in the transition, and have capacity to validate the emotions that your child, the thoughts, feelings, their experience, and then also to help them problem solve, right? So it's like, hey, OCD seems really chatty right now, right? But you're not going to be able to do that if you are also very anxious. So I'm thinking of one mom that I spoke to yesterday whose son transitioned to college, and it's, predictably it's been as a freshman sort of difficult, right? And he's going to be fine, but it's the transition, and she's anxious. And so when she interacts with him, she's very businessy and very like boom, boom, boom. And I think that that's probably adding a little bit more to the anxiety. And she's like, I'm just really anxious for him. And I'm like, I know, but we can't expect him to manage his anxiety if we're, not doing that part too. And you're part of the support system, and we got to project the calm and project the confidence. And so I think that's like number one. For the littles, I think that we're sort of back to school already, but I think the routines, getting the routine set, there should be an evening routine, morning routine, homework routine, backpack, getting clothes ready. I think routine is great for kids. I also think getting kids together with their classmates outside of school also helps with the social aspect and helps manage the anxiety a little bit. Also just communication with the teachers and the counseling staff at school, making sure that if your child is struggling, that you're communicating with the school about that and creating the team early, requesting testing if we think that they need it, and, a 504 plan. So just sort of, understanding that it's a process, it'll be a little bit rocky, and not panicking.
I love that in terms of managing, and I think recognizing that internally it can feel really scary, but being able to present for your child in a way of, okay, we've got this.
We got this. Exactly. We got this. And knowing when your child might need, if your child is in therapy, obviously you want to be, coordinating with the therapist. But if your child isn't, and your child's really struggling, and the support at home and at the school, in the classroom, and in the counseling at school isn't enough, trying to, hook them up with their own therapist and then add them to the support team at the school. I think those are my main pieces of advice.
Yeah. And we'll get into school support teams in a second, but I want to go over to Alex first and see, Alex, what's kind of helpful for you and what's coming up for you as you hear these perspectives?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, first of all, having parents that are managing their anxiety about things is like so incredibly huge. And I really think, you can't, how are you going to expect your child to do something that you're not doing yourself, right? So I think that that's a huge thing, and that really has an impact on me. And one thing that actually my parents have been supportive with me about is this is maybe like a college level version of the kind of being late to school type thing, because I can't really be late to class. In fact, actually, last semester I was late to quite a few classes, and that was not a good experience. But I'm working on. I've been working on that, or rather, this happened like freshman year, and all the freshman stuff. But something that you can do as a college equivalent is I'm taking a class with a professor who could be very easy, could be very hard. I don't know what grade I'm going to get in that class. I want to get an A because I want to eventually get a PhD, but I don't know. And I told my parents about this, and they're like, "Yeah, you know what? Do what you do." Even though my parents are, in some ways, uh, careful about grades, but they've been really understanding, and so I think that that's something I'm going to push myself towards. Yeah, and I'm definitely stressed out about it, but I'm just going to do my best, and it's a meaningful class, and that's what I think is important too.
And I love that you're able to say it's a meaningful class, and it can be stressful and it can carry all of these emotions, and we can still get a lot out of the class. Like, we can hold all of these things together, which I think is probably an aspect that there's such an interesting thing that we learn from treatment as well, moving through, of being able to sit with the discomfort of maybe these really hard classes and finding meaning in it. So I wonder for you, especially as you're navigating the semester and hard classes, and maybe even looking back at your middle school and high school experience, what things were helpful and maybe not helpful that were in place in schools for you from an administrative standpoint? And going to Matt Bannister at 718 said, schools want schools to have a great support network in place for kids with OCD so they don't feel overwhelmed or severely anxious, and that would be great. So I wonder what this looked like for you in your schools, what was helpful, and what maybe do you wish you had as an experience? And I can come back over too if that's helpful.
Yeah. Well, something that I think has generally been pretty helpful has been both, in college and in school, like disability services, disability accommodations. This is a very important thing. I went to a private school, but public schools have, specialized individual education programs. We actually, I did a talk about partially about that in the previous conference, but those are things that are really important. I forget what the acronym they use for them is, but those are, I think the greatest thing is with some people, you have OCD, I can do some stuff, like definitely easily. And sometimes I want to push myself because that helps me with my exposures. On the other hand, there are some limits that I have. And so, for instance, I have been working with the Office of Disability Services, trying to understand, there are some tests that I can take completely on my own. Usually, if there's no math and no calculator equations done, it's pretty easy for me to be on time or at least doable. But sometimes with a calculator, I've needed to take extended time. Generally speaking, talking to the Office of Disability Services, not, putting myself in a situation to fail because I'm like too afraid, but having gotten my therapist in the loop, having talked one-on-one to the professors, being like, hey, this is my very specific situation. It's a little bit complicated, but let's work through this. I think that's been very rewarding. And so I think this has been something great in school is the ability to have this kind of dialogue, to understand what we need, what we don't need. This is also something that I think can be a challenge in a lot of instances where the school either provides so much accommodation that it's not really pushing the student, or on the other hand, the school's not being very helpful. I think oftentimes this is where communication, especially from like a licensed clinician, from between the student and the administrator, themselves, if the student is old enough for that conversation to happen, and as well, keeping the parents in the loop, and I think these kinds of communications between everyone, I think, is a really essential part, just to understand the complexity and to find guidance, where in issues that are really, really complicated.
And I love that you bring up the conversations between administration, teacher, student, parent, clinician. I mean, being able to actually have that dialogue and be on a team. So I'd love to hear from you, Denise, kind of from your perspective. How can the school administration, how can school policies help students in going back to school, but also just with OCD in general?
Right. I just want to pick up on one thing that Alex said before I answer. One of the things that's really hard about school and OCD, or OCD in school, excuse me, is that the cannots, the inabilities are inconsistent, right? So sometimes you need extra time and sometimes you don't. On some days you can do it and some days you can't do it. And that's because the state of anxiety fluctuates, right? When you are triggered and when there's a huge state of anxiety, it hijacks your brain and shuts it down. It's very hard to learn. It's hard to pay attention. It's hard to process information. It's hard to recall information. And sometimes educators have a hard time understanding that. If you're dyslexic, you are dyslexic all of the time, across moods, across days, across seasons, across everything. But anxiety does fluctuate, and that can be frustrating for the student, for the parent, for the educator. So I agree with Alex, right? Like, to be able to speak about the nuances of OCD and how that manifests will help you get the appropriate, understanding, but then also the appropriate accommodations. I think schools post-COVID are really dealing with major mental health issues. And I think that schools are trying very hard to meet that need. I think schools, public schools, it's no surprise to anybody, underfunded, teachers are overworked, and yet we're asking them to do more and more. I think we have to support our teachers. I think we have to have, really good policies to support teachers, not like yoga on Wednesday, every third Wednesday, after school. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about real, meaningful, supportive teachers. I'm talking about trainings where you are teaching teachers about mental health. I think the majority of teachers are not taught this. They maybe have one class, but giving them access to high quality trainings and not just a one and done training. The model that I use when I go into schools is I give a training and then I remain open for office hours monthly. Or if the school needs more than that, if it's a therapeutic school, maybe every other week, where you can come and talk and get meaningful consultation about cases as they're unfolding, in front of you, instead of like, oh, everyone's like fired up. And then 3 weeks later, what did she say? Or I don't know what to do. Am I going to do it wrong? So supporting the teachers, access to high quality trainings and ongoing consultation. And then, just making sure that teachers are on board with the fact that anxiety is a real disability and needs to be taken seriously. And also, kids who struggle with anxiety sometimes most of the time, are not going to come up and say, hi, I'm very anxious. I need your help. They might look distracted. They might look like they don't care. They might look like an oppositional student. And so honestly, digging a little deeper, if someone is really struggling, digging a little deeper to get to what might actually be going on. I think those places are a good place to start.
Yeah. And can I just add one thing to that, which is I think that this is a huge point. This idea of recognizing that these things are not as clean cut in some cases. Sometimes what I've seen has been people having these kind of blanket policies where it's like, okay, this is what accommodations looks like. This is what extra time looks like. But what's weird is it's like, this is very different. Even you have two people who have OCD, they may have very, very different symptoms and have very different things that they need. And then, on top of that, then you look at teachers and you say, okay, so here are the systems we're going to put in place. But then you have problems because what if you're overworking the teachers? What if the teachers, so like what kind of resources do the teachers have? What do they not have? How are these going to be applied? And then, on top of that, there's an attempt, we all talk about mental health. We all talk about wellness. Sometimes people like to bring dogs into the schools, therapy dogs. But like, if you bring therapy dogs into school, like one day in a month, that's not a solution. It's a fun thing. It's a great thing. It's good to get students talking about mental health. But, it's important to understand, okay, what is actually happening beyond the kind of letters and beyond the kind of, what ideally seems like is happening when written on paper versus what's actually happening.
And I think you're also highlighting in schools that sometimes or schools can do a really great job of talking about mental health, but not necessarily diagnosable mental health concerns or diagnosable mental illness. And that can be a piece too of, we're going to talk about mental health during finals and we're going to bring dogs in and do all of these things. But what does it look like to actually acknowledge the diagnosable struggles that students are experiencing on a daily basis and the things that they need in order to be successul?
The lights just turned off. 1 sec.
That's okay. Alex is in real life school scenario at college. This is real. But I love recognizing too that it is not the same for everybody. And that, gosh, in education, my students used to always talk with me about this, even with extended time, where some days needing the 100% extended time or 50% extended time and other days not. And students feeling frustrated that they had to stay in the room on the days that they didn't need that 100% extended time because it wasn't a day that was necessary for them. And that's really, really challenging. So Shersti, I wonder for you, and especially at the younger ages, what does it look like for the school or for teachers to be supportive in the classroom, especially as students head back to school?
Yeah. So one thing I do every year, right as soon as I find out who the teacher is, well, this year I actually talked to Jaden about it. I said, I usually talk to your teacher. Do you want me to talk to your teacher? Are you okay with that? He said yes. So I say, hey, can I talk to you about Jaden real fast? And then I will call them. And I learned early on, the first thing I say is Jaden has been diagnosed with an anxiety disorder. Because if I say OCD right away, like one of the teachers was like, oh, my son has a thing with numbers and he's an accountant. And I was like, oh, that's not what I mean. Like, that's not what this is. So I always start with this is an anxiety disorder. And I explain it a little. And then I say later on, this is OCD. And usually for us, his OCD happens the minute he walks in the door from school. Like there's not usually a lot of things going on besides mental compulsions at school. But I do tell the teachers some things to look out for. Avoidance is something that is common. If someone is sick, like if he found out they were throwing up, then at recess he will go sit by a tree and read a book and isolate himself from people because he doesn't want to get sick. Or he'll spend a lot of he'll be doing work in his desk because he feels like he has to finish it even though he's not supposed to be doing that work at that time. So I explain a little bit of what it looks like, and then I explain a little bit of what they can do, like telling him, well, maybe you won't finish and let's just hang it up how it is. You don't have to keep working on it. And I just try and give them a little piece of what they can do. And then I let them know, ask me any questions. Like Denise was saying, most of the time Jaden won't go up to his teacher and say, I'm having anxiety today. So I try and also send a message. Like I'll say, hey, this morning was intense. Like Jaden's coming in hot and I don't know what today is going to look like. And most of the time they've been receptive and understanding. Like fortunately we've had really good teachers so far. So yeah.
They want to know. They want to know. Teachers, for the most part, want to know. They want to know that your child had a hard morning. They want to know what the OCD tells are. They want to know what works, what works at home or what to say, so they don't have to reinvent the wheel. So it really is a group and team effort. And I find that for kids with anxiety who have a hard time asking for help, I don't want to be a bother, I don't want them to think bad of me. I find that they do feel helped by the team. They know mom and the teacher are communicating. And I also agree with what Alex said earlier. Like any meeting you have, if the child is old enough and willing to bring them in, and on the process, I think that that's just very empowering. But who better to explain what's really going on or problem solve what might be helpful in the classroom, but the person who's really struggling with it.
Mm-hmm. I'll say, like, when I was in the classroom, my favorite thing, especially with teens, is when a student would come up and say, here's what I need this semester, and here's why. And it would give such an awesome opportunity. And again, it didn't always happen, but it would give such an awesome opportunity for me to ask questions and say, okay, here's how we can have this conversation. Are there things that we can shift throughout the semester? And it's, I think, so helpful when the child or the teen is able to be a part of that process.
Right.
Yeah, and something I had some of my teachers, they did was they have like send out these sheets and they're like, hey, let's fill this in either before class or during class. Even some of my professors actually gave us surveys. They're like, what are your goals for this semester? What are you looking to improve upon? And this is happening in college too, except in college it's digital instead of pencil and paper, but it's, basically the same idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love doing that for the semester. And then also for educators who are listening, really for any age, you can do beginning of semester, end of semester, but also on a daily basis to check in with students, like across the board with mental health. I always used to, with my students, especially teens, do virtual check-in forms and check-out forms where they could kind of share how they were entering the class, and it would be a one-line thing. And on their checkout forms, they would share something they learned for the day, but I always also had a feelings wheel, and they could put in, how are they leaving the class? What were you? And Alex is probably chuckling because you're like, oh, that's something I would do. But it was really funny because my students used to remind me if I didn't give them the checkout form for the day, like, Chaplain K, you didn't give us the feelings wheel to check out. Like, we want to share what's actually going on with us in the midst of this day. And that's kind of a cool thing. Go ahead, share, Steve.
Something else I wanted to add is, I think it's so valuable for teachers to know that kids who are 5 and 6 and 7 years old can have OCD, can have an anxiety disorder, not just OCD, but like kids who are young can struggle with mental illness, and it's real, because that's one thing that we experienced when Jaden first got his diagnosis was, well, he's so young, like, how can you know for sure? And I'm like, trust me, we know for sure, like, this is a thing. So some sort of, like, if administrators or some sort of trainings could happen that says, like, these are mental health conditions your students could have in first grade, and like just something to say, oh, this is what that means, this is what OCD is, like a better understanding of that being a reality for our kids.
Mm-hmm. Denise, I would love to have you speak a little bit more to, you do such amazing work of training individuals in what OCD is and educators. And also we have some great resources with the IOCDF, like Anxiety in the Classroom. And I would love for you to speak a little bit to what this looks like and how we can get the word out about what this is for kids of all ages in schools.
Sure. I was just looking at the time and I'm like, it's flown by. We have so much more to say, right? So this is just an overview. I love that we have the different perspectives, but anxietyintheclassroom.org is a program that the IOCDF developed to address this issue. And I love the website because it's written from 3 different perspectives, right? So it's written for educators, it's written for parents, and it's written for students. And before we started writing or developing the program, we sent out surveys to each group because, as a clinician, I'm like, well, I think I know what people want to learn about, but guess what? Maybe that's not true. So we surveyed, we got 1,000 parents that got back to us and said, here's what we want to learn. And we wrote that. And then we got 1,000 educators. Here's what we want to learn. And we wrote. 1,000 students told us, here's what we want to learn. And we wrote. And I think that it's a really comprehensive website that is always being added to and edited. And, it's a very dynamic website, but I think it's a great place to go to get more information, more in-depth information on everything that we're talking about. We're really proud of it. And I think what we're trying to do is have, set it up so that schools can download portions of it to have a 1 hour in service or a half day in service or a full day in service. Our affiliates can go into schools and provide trainings. Clinicians can go in and provide trainings just to really, again, get the word out. So to share Steve's point, when I did a little pilot study before we wrote the Anxiety in the Classroom website, I contacted about 20 different educators, principals, counselors, teachers, aides, and they said, oh no, we don't ever see OCD. We see a lot of anxiety though. And I'm like, okay. As we dig a little deeper, it was OCD that they were seeing, but they didn't know it was OCD or didn't, whatever. They just didn't quite know that it was there. That's why we named it Anxiety in the Classroom, but we really need to help them understand exactly what's going on so that we can get appropriate accommodations and appropriate support. So we're doing live streams like this, Lunch and Learn with Liz and Chris, and really just trying to educate the public that this is out there and hope that it's helpful.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I love seeing people in the chat already talking about how fantastic Anxiety in the Classroom has been. And Denise, to your point, one, educators want to help. That's why people are in schools to begin with, but often don't recognize that OCD is what's showing up.
Of course. And why would they? This is not what, they didn't get educated about this, but they are helpers. Most teachers are helpers and they want to help. And so we wanted to provide something for them. It's right here for you. Written for you with your feedback. And of course, we are always open to, editing or additions if people want. But we know that you are working so hard for our students. And we know post-COVID, it's harder than ever, harder than we ever imagined. And so hoping that this is helpful. But also, again, a whole parent section teaching you what your children's rights are and how to access your children's rights and giving you talking points and, tips and tricks for how to communicate with the educators. And then for students, here are things for you to be considering and things for you to learn and skills for you to be looking to develop, etc.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Well, I want to go to Alex with some of this. And I do want to encourage folks, if you have, I know we have some great dialogue and advocacy happening in the chat, but if you have specific questions, we would love for y'all to ask. We have about 40 more minutes and I have a lot of questions, but this group I know would love to answer your questions and things that you care about. So Alex, speaking to these great resources that exist, these great resources that are out there, what has been the most helpful for you in terms of actually communicating with teachers, communicating with professors, advocating for yourself? And what is the response to that been?
Yeah. Kind of there was a chat from Matthew Bannister, I think, talking about how, kids advocating in schools. And that's something that I did. I did a Zoom, when I was in high school, I did a Zoom meeting. This was back during the pandemic. I did a Zoom meeting about a guide that I wrote on kind of mental health and what teachers, what classmates and what parents should know about OCD in the classroom. And I presented this to, I think it was like the class that was like 2 years below me, to the grade over Zoom. And I also, gave them the guide. And so I think these are great things. It's great to have these kinds of guest speakers. There's a real question as to what can you do? What can't you do? Sometimes there are different resources that, just are sometimes harder to come by. But I think that it definitely needs to be the case that schools are taking these things like really, really, really seriously. I'm right now in an adolescent mental health seminar right now. And something we've been talking about is first year college students, around like a third of them or something have some sort of, so I forget if it was like a third have like some sort of a mental health condition or have struggled with it sometime in their life. But, these are like insanely high numbers of people, regardless of whatever the numbers are. This is a real thing. And one of the leading challenges that a lot of these people are facing. So I think that at this point, mental health is a necessity. So once we know that it is a necessity, the question is, okay, what can we do about it? And I think that definitely having communications between experts, between medical professionals, I think is an essential part of this. I think having programming put in place for this is essential. I think funding special programming as well, in addition to kind of, normal, accommodation services and normal, means of taking care of students, with such as guidance counselors or whoever. I think there are the most important thing is to really, really be making this a number one priority. On college, something that I like doing is just doing personal advocacy. I'm trying to start a club for people who have OCD, and it's been really meaningful. And just, I had an experience where I talked about my OCD in university writing, and one of the people in the class said, because I talked about my OCD, she realized she had OCD, and then she was able to get treatment, or at least, be able to find better resources. And, so I think advocacy in any kind can have huge impacts. And similarly, I think there's tremendous potential if there is advocacy done right from schools. At the same time, there is tremendous danger if this isn't made to be an absolute priority. So that's what I would kind of say. And I think there are definitely so many different levels to it. There's this personal advocacy, there are accommodations, there are clinical resources, there's referrals to other resources. There's so many different ways in which it can look, but I think it has to happen in as many ways as possible.
Right. And I think that this is what colleges are finding out right now. There is a huge mental health crisis in higher education. And I think that, like you said, Alex, if they don't take this seriously, it's dangerous. And I think that's exactly what they're finding out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Suicide rates are pretty high.
So in terms of,
and also like addiction, social media, bullying, cyberbullying. I mean, suicide. I mean, it's not, it's in addition to suicide. It's just so many things. I mean,
so many things.
Mm-hmm. So I mean, in Denise, and then I'll go to Shersty as well with some of our younger kids. But so what is advocacy? What can that look like in this area? You're doing so much of this and going to schools again, and in sharing anxiety in the classroom, and in sharing what OCD actually looks like. But what do we need to be doing as a community? I know that Matt spoke on having IOCDF advocates and advocates tour schools, have virtual presentations, do all of these things. But how do we raise awareness when this is such?
Yeah, I mean, I think I really liked what Alex, I'm like loving everything you're saying. But I really liked what you said when you said, like, I'm just telling my story, right? And when you told your story, not only did you raise awareness, but you were destigmatizing the issue. And so I think that it's just incredibly powerful to be able to do that. So as a clinician, I'll come on the live streams. I'm going to help develop the programming. I'll help disseminate the programming. Shersty is sharing hers. Like, I love that we have all the perspectives, right? Because parents will be empowered by fellow parents. Students will be empowered by their fellow students. I'm hoping to be speaking to everybody, but like the professionals or the educators about what we can do. And I think we just keep doing what we're doing and keep pushing things out. I think it was Nathan in the chat was talking about using OCD Awareness Week as a huge push. Maybe everybody's really concentrating in October around, talking about mental health in schools and trying to be a resource. So I think we keep doing what we're doing and try to do it on a larger scale, but people telling their stories is very powerful.
Yeah. And I think an element of what you said that really resonates with me is that this is a team effort. It's not just the university. It is the university. Absolutely, it's the university. It's not. But even within the university, who is it? It's the professors, yes. It's the counselors, yes. It's the, accommodation people, yes. In a school, is it the teachers? Yes. Is it the guidance counselors? Also, yes. Is it the highest administration? Absolutely. But in addition to all of that, there's also the parents and the students themselves. I think everyone needs to be working together to finding these kinds of solutions and not kind of saying, okay, this is someone else's problem. It's about everyone, I think, taking responsibility and also recognizing you know, just how meaningful it is and how potent it is if people work together with their own perspectives, how much potential there is.
I love it. We are all in this together. And I see Stacy at 7:53 saying even possibly for Awareness Week, having advocates call the local schools in the area, send out educational packets, setting up an appointment to go in person. I love all of this. And I know the IOCDF will be pushing out more as Awareness Week gets closer of actual action items of things that we can do. But these are amazing because we all are in it together and it makes a difference. The conversations that we're having tonight, and then everything you will go back and do in your communities based on what you're listening to. And I'll say, even for adults, students, well, whoever's advocating, but students advocating makes such a difference in people just telling their story in the way that you're talking about, Alex. And I've talked on these streams about my story before, and a lot of my inspiration to start advocating was my students. I lost a student to a mental health struggle in ways that were really, really challenging for me. And I had been so scared for such a long time to open up because I worried about what my students, what families would think of the school chaplain having OCD, having a diagnosis. What does this mean? What does this look like? And it was really in honor of a student that I lost, but also in honor of really, really brave kids that I had that started to speak up about their mental health struggles that inspired me to actually feel like, man, well, I need to get treatment and I'm the chaplain. Like I should be saying that it's okay to seek mental health treatment. If my kids who are 12 and 13 can do that, I should be doing that too. And I mean, I think about even where I am with my journey that I wouldn't necessarily be here without my students speaking up. And that's a really, really neat thing of how we are all in this together of all ages. So Shercy, I would love to hear what advocacy looks like for you and for Jaden and what it means to advocate even in his classroom and to speak up and what him sharing his stories looked like, even as the most recent Youth Hero Award.
Yeah. So I started advocating kind of for similar reasons what you were saying, Katie, and something that Alex said, like, it doesn't have to be a big thing, just one person. Like, it was because of one person that we found out Jaden had OCD, because we called a therapist and he knew what OCD was. I had seen so many who didn't. And he said, I can't help you, because he understood it. And that one person made all the difference for us. So with Jaden, we talk about like how much you want to share of your story is up to you, but we have this amazing privilege of knowing what OCD is and being able to help other people get a diagnosis. And we talk about what his life was like 3 years ago and what it is like now, and how it's like a blessing that we can share that quality of life opportunity with other people. So he does little things I don't even realize. He did like a paper on the board and it said 3 facts about me. Like I'm this, and I have OCD. He got a Valentine from a little girl. He probably won't be happy. And it said, Jaden, you're the best at fighting OCD. On the little Valentine. And I thought, he is teaching these little groups of 30 kids at a time what OCD is. And they're going to be able to go out in the world and say, that's not OCD. My friend had it. And he said it was this. And so I think just teaching your kids, if you have kids with OCD, that any little bit they want to share, even if he had a friend come up and say, I have anxiety sometimes too. He doesn't have OCD, but he made a connection with someone. And I think it's just about connection, education, and just like little ways. OCD isn't this, it's this. And it's just by sharing your story with even one person. Then they'll share it with one person, and then it'll just keep rippling down.
Yeah, and I also think that another thing that's so crucial here is sometimes a very small action can make a very big impact. And, if there's, one person that says, I don't feel that much, me personally, I'm okay with talking about, my conditions. In fact, I was asking a professor earlier today about accommodations. I was speaking really loud. I was like, do you want to move to the side to talk about this? And I was like, oh, okay, right. Because, I'm perfectly happy to talk about this. Some people have difficulty. And so when I can start talking about it, it can make a huge difference. And so this is what I think, sometimes even a small resource, sometimes saying, this is what, these are some of the, methods, some of the resources that are available to you, even just saying, you're not alone, saying, look, there are ways, and this can, even if it feels hopeless, there's so much more potential than it can even feel like in the moment. And saying, look, regardless of what it feels in the moment, just trust me. And in the future, you'll realize just how much better it can be than you could possibly imagine, really holding on to hope in some ways in advocacy, and moreover, providing those resources to be able to, actualize it. I think there's so many different ways that I think it's really essential.
Mm-hmm.
And
Alex, oh yeah, go ahead, Shirley.
Something else I was going to say is find a way to share that you feel good about. Like Jaden made his movie. He loves making movies. So I was like, use what you're good at and what you love, and that's how you can share. You don't have to share, like I wouldn't go make a movie about OCD because that's not my thing, but it was his thing. So find a way to advocate. Like maybe Instagram isn't your thing, but maybe calling the school principal is your thing. Like find a way to advocate that works for you, and it doesn't have to be what other people are doing.
I love that. Being able to use your passion, whether it's going back to school time or any time of the year, to use who you are to advocate. And Alex, that's what makes your advocacy so powerful. Shirley, that's what makes Jaden's advocacy so powerful, and yours on Instagram. It's using those things that we're passionate about and bringing that out. And I love what Sarah said at 8, y'all being here helps me. That seemingly small thing, an hour each Tuesday, makes a big difference in my life. Thank each and every one of you for being a part of my people in this battle. And you're a part of that for us too, Sarah, showing up where we get to continue to kind of journey in this together. So I think the advocacy is, of course, so important as we're letting schools know what OCD is, why back to school is so significant for individuals with OCD. But I wonder if we have educators listening tonight, if we have teachers listening, are there ways beyond going through OCD education to create a safe space and a safe environment in the classroom for students with OCD? Are there particular things at different ages that can be done to create a safe environment for people to, be able to effectively either speak up, engage with others, engage in testing? What would be the way to create the safest environment for everyone? And I can start with whoever has something pop into their head, because I know that's a big question. Yeah, go ahead, Alex.
I think one thing I will say is being enthusiastic and not seeing it as a chore is something that is very important. I'm thinking about, the professors, you go through the syllabus, and you're like, oh yeah, mental health accommodations, all right, whatever. Okay. Lateness policy, don't be late, chat GTP policy, don't cheat, all this stuff. But I think the important thing, I think you will also find professors who are like, okay, they take a second when they see the mental health portion, maybe they also, care a little bit about some of the other policies as well. Maybe they'll say a little more of a word than just briefly skim over it. But I think when professors are, and teachers as well are really inviting of saying, look, this is, whatever you're dealing with, I'm here to help, and I want you to succeed, and I actually care about you. Sometimes you'll have a teacher that will be like, look, so sometimes you'll have a teacher, especially maybe you have like some hardcore like physics teacher or STEM teacher who's like very, very a little bit spacey and whatnot. But some of those teachers can actually, in their own way, I think, also say, kind of express how they really do care about trying to be understanding and open-minded to the student, and really going out of their way to help and ensure the students actually succeed. And I think once you have a teacher that's mission-driven in this way and that expresses this, I think that relieves a huge burden from the individual person. And I think that then starts to become kind of an uphill. I don't know if I don't know what the metaphor is, but I would say like an uphill battle instead of a downhill. Basically, you're going with the current instead of against it. So it's it starts becoming something that is very, very doable, and that has less conflict. And really, I honestly think that everyone really benefits from that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Alex. Shirsti, I would love to go to you about what's the most helpful in creating that space in the classroom, maybe for Jaden or for others.
Yeah, because we've only dealt with OCD in elementary school, I think like something I kept thinking of was like Miss Frizzle from the Magic School Bus, like her little motto is like, take chances, make mistakes, get messy. And I think that the teachers who have been able to have that attitude, like, I'm trying to think of the best way to explain it. Like Jaden worries so much about having things done on time and being on time and getting 100%. Like if the teachers who are like, let's make a mistake, like it's okay to make mistakes, having that attitude is just going to lessen his anxiety, because he'll know I can make mistakes and that's okay. Whereas teachers who are very rigid and strict could cause him more anxiety. So I guess what I would hope for is teachers to help the kids see, like, you can make mistakes, you can get messy, you can take risks, you can not be perfect in every way, and that's okay.
I love that. Them being able to carry that flexibility in the classroom and being able to showcase that for the students is huge, that they can be perfectly imperfect, that things can be messy. And it's funny. I think back to even my, and I really appreciate this. I unfortunately, like so many, I didn't get the effective treatment for about 17 years. But when the initial kind of signs of OCD showed up and my parents actually took me to my first therapist, it was actually because my first grade teacher called my parents in and said, hey, we really noticed that Katie is trying to do things perfectly. And it was actually, we're trying to teach students in the classroom that they can make mistakes. And Katie is sitting inside and erasing the lines off of her paper and doing all of these things. And we're really trying to showcase that they don't have to be perfect. And looking back, especially, gosh, that was in 1996. For a teacher to recognize that's something, this level of perfectionism, we're trying to encourage flexibility, it is really, really huge. And while it didn't at that point lend to the effective treatment, I appreciate then the sentiment of that. And I mean, so Denise, I mean, I wonder for you, what do you think is the most helpful when you're training teachers? How do you create an environment in the classroom that helps students to learn with OCD?
Right. So once again, I'm just going to pick up on something Alex said. My spouse is a math professor at a STEM college, STEM university, calculus on the board behind me. And he actually has made a lot of changes after, listening to me do a lot of this work. So he has changed his syllabus for every single class to take into account. He has a mental health statement on there that he spends time on with his students. And he tells them, like, I know this is hard and I want to hear. People who are struggling oftentimes avoid. You don't have to avoid with me. Like, I am open-minded. I'm flexible. Here are the ways in which I can be flexible. The sooner I hear from you, the more flexible I can be. And he's heard from students that really matters. And so I think, like, when you're in elementary and school feels a little like a family, and then you go to middle school or high school, like, there's still like the community. But in college, classes can sort of, they can feel separate. So what individual professors do really matters. And I do think department heads should be having trainings, mental health trainings, and teaching professors about what to do, because they feel very lost. Their students are struggling. They disappear. They show up last minute, really struggling, and they don't know how to help. And they're feeling like the hot potatoes in their lap. So I think department heads need to educate their professors about what the school, the university has to offer. The counseling department, how to make a referral. The wellness center, how to make a referral, who to tell if your student has disappeared and you're worried about them. Like, let your professors know and try to train them. A lot of times, especially with STEM schools, like, this is just not the way the professors think. And so to keep trying to educate them about this, I think, is really helpful. With the littles, with the youngers, I think that, you guys are really right that I think it's the culture in the classroom, it's the values that you have in your classroom, and the way that those values are sort of discussed in like thread through everything that you do. It's not just like kindness and flexibility, you know, as words on the board. I mean, it's the way in which it runs through your curriculum and just your behavior with the students. Again, teaching, helping students change the nature of their relationship to mistakes. I think that is key. Helping teachers understand that we really want to praise effort and not outcome. A lot of the students that I work with perfectionism, who are like a peer, like they have it all together, they're the model student. Well, that student has been up until 3 o'clock, you know, 2 weeks in a row trying to get that done. And when you tell them they are your model student, it's really hard for them to come to you and say, I need help. So just to be aware that even though you may be really trying to praise the child, if inadvertently we might be reinforcing the wrong thing. So I don't want teachers walking on eggshells. I just want them to continue to be curious about mental health, how it shows up in their classroom, and how they can run the classroom in a way that creates an environment where students can come and ask for help. Struggle is destigmatized. Mistakes are okay. They're a valuable way of learning, and that you just create a culture in your classroom where, you know, learning differences and all differences are celebrated and people feel comfortable. I think those are great places to start.
I love that. And I think I'm curious just to Mike's question at 8:08, and I think this is a great question too. So he says, I'm 100% for educating teachers about anxiety, OCD, ADHD, autism spectrum disorders, and so on. From my experience by talking with several teachers and me being a strong advocate on these particular disorders, the teachers seem to be getting overwhelmed with 504s and IEPs. Having additional responsibilities like looking out for anxiety disorders, I feel might push teachers to the brink. What can be done to educate teachers and advocate for students that can be manageable? And that's Mike. Thank you so much. Yeah, Denise, I was going to go right back to you with that. So thank you, Mike, for bringing that up.
First of all, hi, Mike Snow. Second of all, I think what I'm finding, especially in high schools, is that a lot of teachers are actually running their classroom as if everybody's on a 504. Right. So they do have built-in flexibility. They do have policies around extra time. They do make sure that the instructions are written like on the board, they're in the portal, that people are writing them in their book, that they do check in with students to make sure that they actually understand what the instructions are and that a student really understood. They're breaking things down into smaller pieces. They're putting separate deadlines on a thing. So I think that's one thing, is like there's a lot of accommodations that are on a lot of 504 plans that can just be part of the classroom, the way it's run. I also think to help educators understand that if you can invest a little bit in doing some of this, you get a lot back, right? So it's easier to manage things earlier and ahead of time than on the back end. And so there's just a lot of, it's like time, but with a payoff versus the time that feels like a sink. And so just to make sure that they understand there is, yes, we are asking way too much of our teachers. That is just the universal understanding. But if we can do it in a way that helps them like maximize the investment of their time, I think if we can frame it that way, then we tend to get buy-in on that.
Thank you for speaking to that, Denise, and Mike. Thank you for being willing to ask that question. And I think it is so important. And Denise, to your point, I think yes, teachers are. Gosh, I remember teachers are asked to do a lot, like so much. But being able to then offer the support, I actually remember when I was in the classroom with kids, every training that was offered, initially feeling like, oh, this is another thing, and then getting into it, especially if it was around something that I didn't know, whether it was on mental health or something else, and feeling like, oh, this is actually a huge relief because I'm actually getting the skills and tools to be able to support the kids in my classroom in ways that I didn't know how. So I think the hope is that this ends up supporting educators as well, so that they can respond in ways that are effective without things becoming so challenging.
Right. I just want to say one more thing. I also think that principals should be helping teachers have mentors or consultants where they can go with some of these questions so they're not feeling so alone in it. Because I think it's the overwhelm or the not knowing or worrying that they're going to make a mistake that really causes lots of stress. And so you can buddy a teacher up, or again, you can have a mental health consultant available to your teachers in an ongoing way where they can drop in for office hours. I think that's a really significant way to help educators feel supported in meaningful ways.
Yeah, and I think on a university level as well, there should be communication between teachers and the Office of Disability Services. I think everyone should, like these policies should be laid out pretty carefully and pretty precisely. And then I think, I don't know if it's a policy that like mental health is listed on every single syllabus, but I think that it should be a policy that is listed, in depth on every single syllabus as well, more than just like mental health, here's one sentence about it,
Absolutely. Thank you, Alex. I want to bring in, I always try to keep my emails and DMs open if people have private questions they want to ask. So I got an anonymous question that I want to throw out to the group, and if anyone feels comfortable answering this, and this is along the back to school topic, but I think something really challenging that we might have parents or students on here that are facing. So what about for kids who might be right now in an intensive program who aren't able to head back to school? And this is a really challenging time for them because they're in residential or a different type of intensive program where they feel like they're being left behind from their friends who are moving forward in school this semester. And I wonder if anybody has even any words of kindness to speak to them, because in the question, I know this is really challenging for both the family and for, it looks like, the high school student.
Right. I mean, I've worked with many students who have been in residential treatment when their peers are going back to school. And I think that, I think that it's a loss. I think that it's a loss. And I think we need to make sure that we can validate that. But I also would say, just from having done this for a long time, it is essential that you get your OCD, your mental health on track, because that is the foundation from which everything else is built, right? And so it's okay, it is. And also, just to normalize this, there are so many more kids in intensive treatment programs now. Again, I keep saying post-COVID, but it's true. And there's so many kids, so much so that high schools in, different schools have transitioned back into school programs within the school system for kids coming from residential or inpatient hospitalization. So this person is in good company, and it is very real. But I will tell you that if you can make the most of your treatment and not try to get distracted by the fact that you're not in school, really value your opportunity and really work the program, you will catch up. You will catch up. It'll be okay. I have several people on my caseload right now who a couple years ago were in residential during school, and they're doing much better. I'm so glad they went. I'm glad they agreed to it, and it's making school possible for them now. And it's almost like we kind of forgot, that they were there. They maybe, they got tutors and, and the school helped them catch up, but you will catch up and it'll be okay. Just try to focus on what you're doing right now, the opportunity in front of you. Value that as a huge foundational thing to do, and then you can rock it when you get back home.
Yeah, and I'll even expand that to, I would say, anyone who has OCD who's looking toward education. I think you can really do anything you set your mind to, and ultimately you have plenty of students. Everyone has some sort of a challenge in one way or another. But ultimately, I think what differentiates students is often how much determination you have and how much motivation. Do you have a mission? Do you have a drive? Is there something that you find meaningful? And then focusing on what you're passionate about. And I think with that kind of passion, naturally comes a lot of, these things. I mean, look, this was not a great idea, but my first semester I took like a few graduate level classes with people, at JTS, with people who were like, had their stuff together, were much older than me. And, I was able to keep up. I mean, I did, have difficulties with some of the nuts and bolts, but I was able to actually understand the material and was able to, contribute very meaningfully. And I think the important thing is really, focusing on what's meaningful to you, what do you value, and as long as you're speaking from your heart and speaking from who you are, your identity, then I think it doesn't matter how much what age you are, what you did when. I think ultimately, it's not that hard to. I mean, it's always hard. I mean, the hardest thing I think it really is often showing up, because it's not the hardest thing once you have that determination to be able to catch up, to be able to really have the sky's the limit. It just takes practice. And one thing I will add is this practice and this extra effort that you've put in therapy. That's something your classmates did not get. And these are skills that are not just OCD skills, that are not just mental health, mental disorder skills. These are life skills. And I think that kind of determination, that ability, is going to come in tremendously in all aspects of life. And I think Einstein said that school is not about the learning of the facts, but about training of the mind to think. And so I think once you have these strategies, once you have these foundations down, I think that leads into just so much other stuff. It kind of branches out and continues branching out. So I think don't lose hope, don't lose faith, because ultimately I think that it is just so incredibly possible.
Here.
Yes. Something I wanted to add too was, especially for the parents, like I feel like I just feel your feelings in my heart. Like there was a time where we were like, why is our son not able to sleep night after night? Why are other 7-year-olds sleeping and he is up till 10 or 11 or 12 in tears because he just can't go to sleep? And then Denise said, there will be a time where you don't remember. There will be a time where you don't remember. And a few weeks ago, my daughter threw up, and he went through his whole day and he didn't even bring it up to us. And we were looking at each other like, when is it going to come? When is it going to come? And it never came. And so there will be a time where you don't remember. But there are so many people who have been where you are, where you're saying, why can't my child be going back to school with their friends? And you're just not alone. And I think that's the most important thing, is you're not alone, and there will be a time where you don't remember. And you'll look at each other and say, did that just happen? Did we just get through that day and nothing happened? So
yeah, I mean,
and like Alex said, it will at one day it will be your edge. Having gotten through this very difficult thing and learning the things that you learned that are not just about OCD, they're about how you manage all hard things coming up in life, that will one day be your edge. I've seen that 28 years. I've seen it time and time again. So we'll hold your hope, because we're on the other side of that. We'll hold your hope while you are going through this, or your child's going through this, but it can and will be okay, as long as we can help the person in residential stay focused on residential and value what they're doing there as a foundation to what they will do going forward.
Yeah, and I mean, something that I from my perspective, when I was in 5th grade having my initial onset, I was like, very often would just ask my mom, like, when will life be good again? And she was like, maybe it'll be good in April. I'm like, awesome, great. But like, it was this kind of thing where it's like, what? Like, it's so absurd. Like, when will life be good again? And you respond with, okay, April. But I think that is, in some ways, a kind of healthy approach to hope, in that sometimes it just feels like you don't know exactly, and these things feel so distant, they feel so unfamiliar. But saying, you know what, it is unfamiliar, and I don't know, and it's uncertain, and it's hard to internalize, it's hard to intuit, but at the same time, it is still somehow possible. And not only is it somehow possible, our perspectives will shift on it, and we will be able to look back at this time and see how things have changed. I think that is an important approach to have, so you can say, okay, there's hope, there's a possibility. Now let's focus on things one step at a time, what can I be doing right now to be able to be a part of this, to be able to be a part of this upward trajectory. And even, small actions, I think, can be incredibly rewarding, incredibly meaningful, and also incredibly impactful.
Your future self will thank you.
Mm-hmm. I think, this panel is so amazing. And I hope for the person who asked this question, or for anyone really who's navigating this right now with their families, you feel us holding that hope for you. And I think everyone here really so strongly and deeply believes that there is so much hope moving forward. And I think about Denise has probably seen this 10,000 times over beyond me, but just this has been a year where I've gotten to experience, watching a family that didn't know if their child would be able to go back to school at all or go to college, that is now in college and excelling, just absolutely excelling. And to the point that you were just speaking to, and Alex, to your point about having the edge, I've watched so many life challenges come up for this individual that they have soared beyond their peers because of everything they learned in treatment and embracing uncertainty. And just, oh my goodness, I feel just like this immense pride and just want to jump up and down and say, you did it, but not just in OCD, in life, taking all of those things and just excelling. And for families who are watching, or for the family that asked this question, like, your child can be there too.
And we will help you.
We will help you. You are not alone. So as
it is like baby steps, just one step, one moment at a time. We say 1 minute at a time.
Sometimes that's what it is.
Will happen in the next minute. We're like, just take this minute and then the next minute. That's like kind of something we've started saying. 1 minute at a time.
1 minute is, yes. Sometimes that's all we have. In these final minutes of this awesome panel tonight, which has gone so fast for an hour and a half, thank y'all so much for just such amazing discussion. I just want to go to everyone, and if you have a final word of, Sarah said hope is such a beautiful thing. I would like to go to everyone here and say, do you have a final few words of hope for anyone listening tonight as they are heading back to school with families or with students or themselves? But any words of hope during this season? So Alex, I will go ahead to you first.
Sure. I think one thing maybe I would say is we are capable of a lot more than it can seem in one given moment. And what I mean by this is, like, for instance, I was feeling really bad yesterday. I was feeling like dealing with some sort of sickness, plus classes were starting. I was like, I didn't even know if I could make it to classes today, and it's the first day of classes. Like, this was not fun, but I basically said, you know what, look, I'm taking this one thing at a time. This is really, really difficult, but I'm just going to focus on what I can focus on. And I'm going to really, really just dial in on doing the absolute best I can. And, to be able to, even just to be able to kind of make the most out of that situation that I could do. I think that was incredibly significant. And I would say also, it's so much, I think one metaphor that I like to look at is just adrenaline. For instance, you have someone who's like, an 80-year-old guy sees, someone's about to get hit by a bicycle and just like lifts up the entire bicycle or something. We have so much ability. And I think the key is really recognizing, we have potential, and once we believe in ourselves, to recognize this ability, and moreover, to be able to get help, recognize there are resources, look into this, and to really take initiatives, start showing up. And I think recognize that things are often much more possible than it can seem at certain times, and to just stay with what's meaningful through that motivation.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you. Denise, any closing words of hope?
Yeah, for anyone who's transitioning back to school right now and struggling, just to remember that this is not the way it's going to be forever, that transitions are hard. We predict difficulty. We predict that OCD spikes during a transition, and to stay with your plan, keep working with your support team to work through the transition. And I do believe that for most people, there will be a relief at the end of that. And if not, if you are in college counseling center, or your therapist, or if you're a parent and you're watching your child struggle and things don't seem to be getting better, after a few weeks after the transition is passed, then, reach out for formal therapy. But the way you feel right now will not be the way you feel forever.
Thank you, Denise. And Steve, what would you like to leave everybody with?
I think what I would like to leave everyone with, I kind of touched on it in the beginning. Sometimes after summer, I feel like, well, we're back at square one. We're back at the beginning, but we're really like, I've shared this before, but you're just on an upward spiral. You can never go back to not knowing about OCD once you know, and like we can't unlearn the tools that we've learned. So we're just circling around. You're just circling around, and just remember the tools. And if you're just learning about OCD, like that's the first step in your spiral, and you'll learn the tools and you'll never be back at square one. So it's not a step back, you're just circling around.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you for these words of wisdom. And thank you all so much for being here. Quickly, before folks jump off, just want to remind you that the online OCD conference registration is now open. You can visit iocdf.org/online-OCDcon to register. This year's OCD online conference will feature 2 days of virtual programming for the entire OCD and related disorders community. Walks are also taking place across the country. You can visit iocdf.org/walk to find a walk near you. And the online proposal system for online OCD camp is now open. If you're interested in presenting programming for this special event, you can head to iocdf.org/camp. And finally, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel and be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, because this live stream is one of many. You can see the whole schedule of future streams at iocdf.org/peace of mind. If you're looking forward to what's coming up, we have an Ask the Experts tomorrow at 12 p.m. Eastern, a community conversations right back here next Tuesday, the 12th at 7 p.m. Eastern, and a research roundtable next Wednesday. So lots coming up. And you can also view recordings of past live streams, as well as watch our hosts answer your pre-submitted questions with OCD Mailbag on IOCDF's YouTube channel, youtube.com/IOCDF. As always, remember to like and subscribe to get notified when live streams are scheduled. And if you need resources, please visit iocdf.org. Y'all, thank you so much for being here tonight. And I hope you felt the hope and the love in this group, because we definitely felt it from you. And it is such an honor to be on this journey together, because as you heard from us so many times tonight, we are in this together. We are advocating together. We are a team together, and we will continue to hold hope for one another. We'll see you next time.